your bank account, every possession you have, it all belongs to God. Now, we can choose to say, no, that's not true. This is my stuff. I worked hard for it. But that puts us in a disadvantage of understanding how money really is supposed to be used. So God's given us this money, and we talked about different categories of spending, for example, needs, and God gave us our money so that we could have our needs met. That's part of the reason God lets us have His money, is so our needs can be met. And then we even talked about wants and desires. You know, there's things beyond what I actually need that I'd like to have, or even some things that's like a really big dream item. Man, if I could ever have that. Missy's Jeep is that. Missy's Jeep is one of those dream items, you know, that she thought about for years and years. Now, several years ago, we could have just went to the dealer, picked the one she wanted, and started making payments on it. But we knew that that was not what God wanted us to do. We were very clear that He didn't want us to go into debt for really any vehicle, the way that I look at it, but especially for one that's just a desire. There's no way that that's what God wanted. And we waited and we saved and we did different things. And in time, God allowed that desire to take place. But it had to come out of surplus money. It couldn't come out of our regular money. It had to come out of surplus money. And so God's going to allow you perhaps to have some of your desires met too, but He wants you to go about it the right way, the way He's showing us in Scripture. Now, something you need to think about, though, is that God providing this money for us and letting us be the stewards of it is not just about my needs, wants, and desires, but what about God's needs, wants, and desires? Okay? So a part of my financial planning is I've got to let it click that, hey, God might not want everything I want. He might not desire everything I desire. And I want those things to blend together. I serve a gracious God that is loving and will let me have things I want and things that I desire. But is that always going to be the way I think about my surplus money? Is everything I want and everything I desire? Or sometimes am I going to say, man, I got an extra $1,000 and this missionary over here has told us in their report they have this specific need. God put me right in the right position to be able to meet that need. You know, I'm going to go tell Pastor that I'm giving this $1,000 and this is where I want it to go. And God let me meet one of His wants, one of His desires. And so when we think about those categories, don't think about just you. Think about how that affects your family and how that affects God. So then we said, if we're really going to do this, if we're going to get a plan together and have our mind straight on this, what we've got to do is we've got to figure out where we're at. I mean, where am I at right now? There's no way I could set a budget if I don't know where I'm at right now. And so what we said, there was two things we said that needed to happen in order for us to be able to do that. We needed to get our debts listed out, because our ultimate goal is to get rid of them. I'm going to get to where there's no debts. That's where I'm headed. And so I got to list them out, and I got to understand how they look and how they affect me in order to do that. And then, secondly, I need to track our spending. I need to spend 2 or 3 months actually getting this written down or getting it into an app or getting it on a spreadsheet so that I know, yeah, here's actually how the money's being spent. Just this, about a week ago, I had a conversation with someone, and as a result of us being in here and having these lessons, they said to me, I never thought about it until you mentioned it, but I did the math, and I spend $93 a month on Polar Pops. Wow. See, when you look at it that way, then you could make the number bigger, right, and go for a year. You know, that's over $1,000 a year on Polar Pops. Now, some people, that's no big deal. The money's there. It's not a problem. I can have as many Polar Pops as I want. Brother Mike can have as many as he wants because he gets them for free. But, you know, it's kind of a revelation, though, where a person could say, wow, if I just stopped getting a Polar Pop, or really trim down on how frequently I get one, there'd be some money available to do this. My family's been struggling here, and I'm spending $1,000 a year on Cokes from a gas station. Come on, man. And so see, it can be an awakening for us when we track that spending. But you got to do every dollar. You can't just, do the big things or the things that you get a bill for. You got to, every single dollar, you got to say, how did I spend it? How did I spend it? And the best way is to not make any adjustments necessarily. Just keep on doing what you do so that you get an honest view of how you're spending the money. So now that we have listed our debts and tracked our spending, that tells us where we're at. The next question is, where do I want to be? That's the next question that we're answering with our budgets. You see, budgets are not about just putting down where we're at on paper. It may start that way. It's not just about getting that in that Excel file or that budgeting app that we're going to use. Our budget is about getting where we want to be with our spending and having something tangible that we can refer to follow it as a plan. If you do all this work and then you just write down, yep, right there, that's where we're at. That's what, according to our spending, this is our budget. That was neat. Then it's up until this point, it would have all been a waste. Because now, based on that information, a plan has to be put into action so that we can get to where we want to be. Current spending is where I'm at. Budget is where I want to go. So I've given you several papers this morning. I got all of these off of crown.org, which is a financial planning website. That's where I got all of these. So you could go there and get these and many more forms that might be helpful to you. But see, the first one, it's the debt list. And it's just like I showed you in the examples last week, how you're going to list those debts out, and you're going to say, okay, here's what I'm owe on, here's who I owe it to, here's what the monthly payments are, here's how much I've got left, the balance that's due, here's when it'll get paid off if I just make the payments, here's the interest rate, and maybe even if I'm past due on anything. And you get that all written out into those categories, so all of your debts get written down there. And that's a super important exercise, because as we start paying these off, and that's what we're going to talk about probably the next week and the week after that, some of those kind of issues, as we start paying these off, you need this information so you can strategically decide, where am I going to start, and then how am I going to start knocking these off one by one and get to where I'm debt-free. So there's a good thing on that. And then the backside of that is an estimated spending plan. And this is all those different categories that we talked about. What do I spend on housing, which is not just my house payment, it's my property taxes, it's my homeowner's insurance, it's my utilities, it's having some money set aside in case I run into a maintenance issue. Okay, that's what my housing is. And then you just see all those different categories. So from your tracking, your spending, you've probably kind of already put some things in categories a little bit, and you're going to start plugging them in on this spending plan. Okay, so here's what my tracking told me. Here's the information that it told me. Now, when you do it this way, you're going to start up at the top, you're going to put your income in there, and you're going to start filling these in. And based on what you learn from your tracking and from listing your debts, you might get to the bottom and have a minus. You might get to the bottom and be like, I'm not making enough money to do this. That's a good revelation. That's good to come to grips with. Wow, I'm definitely spending more than I make. That we can't live there. We can't. That's trouble. Trouble's coming. We need to spend less than we make, and that's what the budget is going to help us figure out. It's going to help us figure out where we're spending the money and how can I get to the point that I'm spending less than I make. So the budget must address our current commitments and what our goals and visions are. And it could take a while to move into the goal and vision part of it, because the first thing that's revealed might be there's no surplus money. I can't have this goal of paying my debts off when there's no extra money. I got to figure out how could I get some extra money in order to do that. And maybe it's controlling spending. There might be an area or two that I can look at and say, wow, I just didn't realize we spent that much there. If we just cut back a little bit, there's an extra $100 a month, and I can start putting it on these debts. Or it might be more work. It might be figure out a way to bring some more money in, okay? So the Lord's going to have to lead in all of that, but that's what we're trying to do. But at first, goals might have to be set on pause just to get it under control, where I am definitely spending less than what I'm making, and there will eventually be some surplus money that I can use for these other things. So, but you need a budget to do that, because that's the only thing that's really going to reveal to you where you're at and what the specific details are. Now, something that could be helpful is a guideline budget. And what a guideline budget does is it just takes all these categories that are normal categories for most people, and it puts a percentage on, this is about what you should be spending in that area. So looking at your forms that I gave to you, the budget analysis form. So that first category, existing budget, that's basically what I learned from tracking my spending. And so I'm going to plug in the numbers. This is reality. This is what we're spending right now. This is what we're doing in those areas. Then the second category is a monthly guideline budget. And that's the other two pieces of paper that I gave you. And that is a suggested percentage. And the two that I gave you are if you're married with 2 children or if you're married with 4 children. But if you go to crown.org and put in the search guideline budget, you can find anything you need there. Well, we don't have children at home anymore. You know, it's just me and my spouse. I'm single. You know, it's there for every situation, okay? So I just chose the one with kids, but then notice what it does. Up at the top, it takes into consideration your income, okay? So do I make $25,000, $35,000, $45,000 on up, all right? And if I make that much money, and in this particular example I'm holding up, I'm married with 2 children, then these are the percentages of what a healthy budget looks like. So let's say that I make $55,000 a year, and I go down here and my 30% is a reasonable amount to spend on my housing. Okay? So if I take $55,000, multiply it by 0.3, then that gives me the number to plug in there. And I really shouldn't be spending any more than that on housing. And so for every category, all you got to do is the math. You know, 12% of $55,000, 10% of $55,000, 2% of $55,000, whatever the number is, you plug those in on your budget analysis sheet. And then what it's going to do is it's going to give you the ability to compare. Okay, so here's what we're really spending, but here's what this guideline budget indicates that we should spend. And then the third category is what's the difference? Okay, so I'm over in those 3 categories, so the difference is plus so much. But then I got 2 or 3 categories here that I'm actually under on. I'm not spending as much as what the percentages indicate, so I've got a little bit of breathing room there. And with the things you learn, then the last column is the new budget. Okay, so obviously we're overspending in this area. We got to make some cuts there. That's just the way it is. We're obviously overspending there. And so you come up with the new budget numbers. And don't be discouraged if you have to do this 3 or 4 times, okay? Because it's going to be tough at first. If you haven't done this, or if it's been a long time since you've done this, it's going to be tough to get the numbers exactly right the first time or two. You're going to have to be flexible. You're going to have to make some adjustments. But here's what you've got to understand. Just writing these numbers down doesn't fix it. You got to say, that's the plan. that's what we're going to do. We're going to only spend this much on that. And if we can only spend this much on groceries, and we get to the end of the month, and we're out of groceries, well, first of all, out of groceries is a funny thing in America, because out of groceries means there's really nothing in there I like to eat, you know. But there is peanut butter in the cabinet, and we maybe could scratch together some pennies and go buy a loaf of bread. So, again, just how serious do you want to be about it? You know, that's the question. But, okay, right now I've got myself in a financial situation that we're coming up short on groceries every month. We're about a week short. Okay, maybe I need to go to Love Chapel. Maybe I need to, you know, there's ways that I can fix this that's way better than going to Kroger and using my credit card to buy groceries. And so these are tough decisions, but I've got to say, okay, Lord, you know, what is it that I need to do? Now, let me tell you this. The guideline budget is just that. It's a guideline, okay? So potentially in your situation, even though it says such and such percentage, there might be a reason that your percentage should be higher or lower, okay? So it's not designed to put handcuffs on you and say, only do this. But at the same time, those percentages are put together by some smart people who have done a lot of research in how these things work. And so, you know, they say I should be spending 15%, but I know I should be spending 25% there. Okay, I mean, if you really truly can reason it out, and it's not just, that's how much I want to be spending, therefore that's what I'm going to, you know, but probably that large of a difference in the percentage is probably a problem you need to fix, not a mistake they made when they put the percentages together. So you don't have to handcuff yourself to it, but you do need to see that, hey, this is probably pretty much where it should land, and I need to be willing to do that. So this can help you detect areas of spending issues, and it can help you set goals to change your habits. And I put in your notes a 3-step process. So the first step is comparing. How does our current spending measure up to these suggested amounts? So I got to compare, and I may very well discover areas of overspending, but I could also maybe discover some areas that I'm underspending, and that money could be allocated somewhere else to help us. So that's what the analyze part is about. Are there areas where you can and should make changes? You know, just because it's what I'm spending now doesn't mean it's what I got to keep on spending. So is there a way that I can make these changes? And then the third area is decide. Make a decision. So I've compared, I've analyzed, and now I'm going to decide, I'm going to determine what I need to do in terms of making adjustments so that we can have a workable budget. I should be able to put all these numbers down on paper, starting with how much I make and how we're going to spend it, and I should be able to get to the bottom and at least have double zeros. You know, at least it equals out. And preferably that there's some surplus funds that I can begin to use to pay debts off and get myself to the place where really our family wants to be in our budget. So just like you tracked your spending, you're going to have to then begin to plug that in on your budget, all right? So I tracked my spending, and I decided this is how much we spend eating out, okay? And I think eating out should be its own separate category. It's usually not on these papers, but I think in the society that we live in today that should be its own separate category. And so you've got it there. Some of them put it like under entertainment is what some of them will put it under. But, you know what that means, okay? Yeah, if I go to the movies or if we do this or that, but make sure eating out is in there. And I've done that. I've looked at how much we spent eating out, and good grief, I can't believe the number's that big. It's too much, you know. Listen, That is a change that everybody can make. Everybody can change that. You can go to much less eating out. You can go to absolutely no eating out. If you're in the habit, it may be difficult, but you're going to have to go to the store. You're going to have to buy food that you can prepare at home. You're going to have to buy food that you can take to work with you for lunch. And just make this commitment. Hey, if I'm spending more than I make, then even McDonald's doesn't make any sense. I need to be having a lunchbox that's got about $2 worth of food in there, because I can do it. I can do it on $2. But even if I go order off the value menu at McDonald's, I'm going to spend $7 or $8. So I got to make a change here, because those daily habits, every little thing is going to add up, and it's going to make a difference. So we got to be very, very methodical about, I'm going to do this. So once we've set our budget, our plan for where we want to be in our spending, then we have to make it work. All this effort to track our spending, to get a workable budget in front of us, it doesn't matter unless we're going to put in the effort. And I want Buddy to show us on the screen. Remember I said crown.org and RamseySolutions.com, okay? And this is off of RamseySolutions.com. They have, I am doing this for me and Missy. I'm doing this. I thought, if I'm going to ask you to do it, then I should do it. And so I'm doing this for me and Missy. And this is what I chose to use. And I know on the screen it might not be super easy to see, but theirs is called Every Dollar, is what it's called. Their budgeting tool is called Every Dollar, all right? And I plugged in some numbers just to have something to look at. But this first column over here, so see up there it says paycheck 1 and 2. So maybe you've got a paycheck and your spouse has a paycheck, or maybe you have two revenue streams. You got your regular job, but you got something extra, a side hustle, or somehow you get some extra money. So, and you can see right there below it says add income. So you can put another one in there. If you got 3 or 4 streams, you can put those in there, okay? And so that gives you what you plan, and then out here to the side, it says received, okay? So for a lot of us, we know exactly what that number is. It's the same every time. It doesn't change. No big deal. But for some of us, that number changes. It's not always the same. And so, I'm going to, in my plan over here, I'm going to put a number that, I'm not going to try to make it the high side. If mine is variable, I'm not going to try to make it the high side of that. I'm going to try to say, okay, yeah, I do sometimes get there, but I can pretty well count on this. And I'm going to try to do that. And so I put the money in there, and then when I actually get the paycheck, I plug it in on where the zeros are at. I plug that in, okay? Here it is, February. I should get this much money. Boom, here's what I actually got. And, again, if your income varies, there could be times that it's lower than what you put in the budget column, but, hopefully not. Then here's, giving to church, and here's emergency fund, and, I plug in the numbers. This is my budget on this side, and then as I go through the month, I have to plug in what I spent. It doesn't matter. If I'm not comparing what's actually happening to what I said was our plan, then it's not going to help me. I got to know. And I got to continue to be just as diligent about it as I was when I was doing the tracking. Every dollar, I like the name. I like that name. Every dollar has to go in there. Every Polar Pop, every Big Mac, there's no room, if you're going to live by a budget, to say this area of spending doesn't matter. Just don't worry about that. It all matters, because the point is that you're telling every dollar where to go. That's the point. Every dollar. I'm not just spending and then, my life is just a result of whatever happened. No. I've got a budget here. I've got a plan. And I'm telling every dollar where to go. And I'm also letting that budget tell me, okay, not this month. You can't go do that. You've already spent that money. You can't go do that. So now listen very carefully to this. You can't think to yourself, Do I want to buy this, or could I get this? When you're budgeting, you can't say, well, let me go check the bank account. Why, sure, I've got X amount of dollars in there. I can go buy that. But that's not budgeting. That's just a balance in your bank account. You don't go to your bank statement or go into the teller and say, hey, what's my balance, to decide if I can spend that money or not. No, you go to your budget. And your budget, you go to the specific category. I'd like to buy this. If I bought it, it would fit into this category. That's where I would record the spending. So is there enough money in that? This one over here that's all zeros because we haven't plugged any money into it yet. But if this is $300 a month, if this month I spent no money in that category, then at the end of the month it would say plus 300. Okay, I've got some money built up. Now, if I need to spend $250, it fits into that category, I can do it. The budget says I can do it because I've got $300 and I only need to spend $250. But if I go there and it says zeros because I budgeted $300 and I spent $300, then I can't do it. It's decision made. It's not even difficult. The budget said no. And the budget gets to tell me what to do because this is how I've lined it out and this is what I've said. Now, this is all about discipline. Because I promise you, some of you are sitting here that, some of you are sitting here that probably don't necessarily need this. You're fine. You've got things under control. You're fine. More probably are sitting here that do need this. And of the more that need it, a bunch of you just aren't going to do it. You're going to sit through all these classes and you're going to say, that was cool. I think what Brother Scott said was right, but I just don't want to go to all that trouble. So I'm not going to do it. And then probably a few are actually going to do this. And you're going to get that on paper and you're going to realize, man, here's some bad areas that we have been making some mistakes in, and it's going to show you the way. It's going to light your path. But you got to decide it's okay. The budget gets to tell me what to do. And when I am deciding about spending some money and the money's not there, then it's not about is there enough money in the bank account. It's about is there enough money in that category in the budget. That's what I got to look at. And even with that, there's some caution. Because sometimes you might have a plus number over here because that category is a variable category. Meaning the amount that I spend on it every month is not always the same. Okay? So I might say that my electric bill, I'm going to put in $250 for that. Okay? And here we are coming into springtime, and for the next 3 months, it's actually $100 or less. So, man, I built some money up there. Every month I got $150 extra dollars. So all of a sudden I got plus $450. But I know that when I turn that air conditioner on, that it's going to chew that up. The bill's going to be bigger, And so I got to realize that, yes, there's extra money there, but there's extra money there for a reason. And so I can't pull out of that because I know this is a variable expense. It's going to change. And the other thing that you need to keep in mind is that the expense may not come monthly or even frequently. But when it comes, the money needs to be there. Maybe you pay your auto insurance every 6 months. If you're able to do it, I would encourage you to do it because you usually get a discount for paying it every 6 months. Okay? And so you may not be able to. You may have to pay it monthly for a while until you can get to a better place. But if you're able, I would encourage you to pay it every 6 months. You get that extra discount for doing that. Well, so mine is due this month, okay? So I'm going to pay it for 6 months. Well, my budgeting app, the next 5 months is going to look really good in that department because I'm going to put enough money in there to cover it, and it's going to build and build and build. It's going to look really good, but then it's going to zero out. The bill's going to come, and it's going to zero out. For a real good example for us is our propane. So we buy propane one time a year. And everything in our house basically runs off of propane. It's how we heat the water. It's how we cook the food. It's how we heat the house. I mean, our house is predominantly propane. And so every year in August, when it's cheap, when it's the cheapest time to buy it, I fill that thing up. And it will last us the whole year. Had one year that I thought maybe not, man, because we had a really harsh winter, and I thought, it was getting really low. We were on fumes, by the time they came and actually filled it up. But what am I doing? I'm putting myself in a position, first of all, to get the best price. If I have to buy it during the winter, ooh-wee, man, oh man, it's expensive. So I'm putting myself in the position to get the best price, but in order to be in that position, I got to save the money all year long. I can't get there and then just try to come up with the money. I got to save the money. And so in my budget, there's a certain amount that goes for the propane bill. Every month it goes in there. So in that way, my bank account's getting bigger, but my budget's not getting bigger because I'm looking at this, oh, look, several $100s in there. Yeah, well, the problem is it costs $1,500 to fill that thing up. So I got to make sure that I've got the money. So even when you're looking at your budget, oh, we got extra money in that account. Well, be careful. It may be a variable amount that goes up and down, or it may be something that comes along only every 6 months or even just once a year, and I got to be sure that I got myself in the right spot for that. So, if you're wondering if you can spend money on something, again, it's not about the bank account, but it's about the budget and what it says. You may have extra in the bank and not always have extra in the budget. And so that's what we've got to be working towards. Now listen, I've told you every step of the way, and I'm going to tell you again. This is work. This is not just, now listen, these apps, they make it easier. I mean, it's glorious, man. You just, and it does the math for you, and so if you want to do it manually with these forms that I gave you, for some people that's more comfortable. I'm just used to that. I'd rather write it all out. It actually even helps my mind to think about it if I write it all out. And so, perfect. But man, those apps are as simple as it can get in terms of it really helps you. In fact, when I did this, I went down through there. Remember I talked about, a guideline budget? The EveryDollar app will make some suggestions for you. Based on the information you put in, when you get down to those categories where maybe a percentage would help you, out here on the sidebar it's going to say, consider this. This might be a good amount. And so it's going to have kind of those guidelines for you to go by. So that's where budget is where I want to go. I listed my debts and I tracked our spending for a couple of months here to figure out where we were at. But where do we want to go? And that's what my budget's about. It has to be realistic. You can't say, oh, I'm going to make sure that we are saving an extra $1,000 a month so we can get this and that done. Well, okay, if you got enough money that $1,000 a month is going to be available, but it has to be realistic. And couples, I would say this to you, you can't make the spending cuts just in areas you don't care about, We ain't cutting my boat payment. We're not, that's, I need that. It helps me to relax. And, you got your big fat argument. And it's okay if you go to the grocery store and have to try to figure out how to make $100 work every week with our 6 kids, We don't need to eat. Let's just go out on the boat. Yeah, going to catch the fish. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, see, you guys know how to work it. Yeah, you already got it figured out. You know exactly how to work it. So this has to be mutual. When the wife says, "Listen, I'm just having trouble buying enough groceries for the week with that amount of money." Okay. Is the answer, do we need to allocate some more money there, which means we'll have to take it away from some other spot? Or is the answer, hey, let's stop buying, we like to eat this, but it's more expensive. Let's kind of cut back on that. But you're going to have to make some decisions, and make sure that as you make these decisions, it's mutual. It's not just me pushing hard for what I want. It's mutual. Father, thank you so much for allowing us to go through this class and this information. Please help us, Lord, to utilize what we're learning so that we can be stronger and do better in this area. Lord, if anybody should be stable financially, it should be your children, because you're the provider. You're the one, Lord, that where this all flows from. And so if we're not disobeying you, we should have financial stability. So Lord, please help us to analyze this and understand it and get ourselves together a good plan that will honor you. And I pray and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.